thing you also want to look at is you have to realize that it's not a one-way street. I think most of us would agree. How many of you guys have had that person who's networked with you that basically take, but doesn't really give you anything back in return? Has anyone ever had that experience? How does that make you feel? You in the back. Yes?
I mean, like, the next time I take calls, you'll support their call to really push you or you ask.
Absolutely. And that's oftentimes the key. It's like, well, what do they want now? I already gave them like what they wanted last time. And then they're the one that really what makes it more frustrating is if you ask them to help you on something, and they're like, oh, I'm really busy, I can't help you, sorry. That's really frustrating. So hopefully no one here is that person, but if you are, you definitely have to make some deposits into your network, or else it's not going to go anywhere. You'll start finding all your networks, will start returning your phone calls, you'll find yourself in a problem. So some of the things that you can do is you have to ask yourself, and these are what I usually think of, is what areas can you help this person or this network? What can you do to help them out? I like to spontaneously help people out, and I always do that because I believe in the long term I'll get goodwill in return. That's my hope. I mean, I'm kind of a holistic, kind of hopeful person. That if I help you out, if I'm fixing your flat tire on the side of the road, that eventually if I have a flat tire, somebody else will help me out. The other thing also is, what's on their agenda is something. What are they worried about right now? How can you help them out? So for example, if you're a job seeker, and you know they're a job seeker, but you see some jobs that you're just really not interested in, but might be in their field, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I just saw this opportunity, I talked to someone, they said it's available. Share that with as many of your network as you possibly can, because people will appreciate you trying to help them out. Think about who you can introduce them to. I have a couple of friends of mine who work in consulting, and they were looking for someone to help advise them as a CEO. He was a brand new CEO of a small company, and he was looking for advice. So I looked around for my network, and I found a couple of CEO advisory kind of coach kind of folks, executive coaches, and I put them in touch with a couple of those. And actually, one of them actually ended up getting the work. That's also valuable too as well. I know this sounds awful, but articles. I read a lot of Economist, I read a lot of Financial Times. I like to read a bunch of different articles. And one of the things that KPMG has done in the past has been, we have these, and I think they're kind of funny, they're little cards that says, for your information, and has my contact details on it. And I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but I remember in the past, I've actually gotten articles from people with a post-it note saying, I thought this article might interest you. I've actually read some of those articles, and if people know you well enough, or at least know what you're interested in, that's very valuable if you get an article from somebody. Because it means that someone is actually thinking about you when they're reading an article, and they say, oh my god, this is such a great article, I'm a photocopy and send it to this person. That actually is something of interest that you might consider. I think it goes to your personal cards too. Same concept. If you have something, reach out to them. And then ask yourself, what kind of advice can you give them? That's the other kicker is, how can you help them? What kind of advice can you do? And remember, it is a two-way street, not a one-way street. Now, I'm going to kind of skip through some of this information because I know that I am, again, standing between you and lunch. But I want you to think about something for when you're building a rapport. That they always say that a lot of the stuff that comes out nowadays is actually mostly nonverbal signals. Verbal is, the message is only half of it. So keep that in mind, is that most of the time you should be looking at people's nonverbals. You also want to think about how you're in sync with them. I would highly recommend that when you look at rapport, you remember that there's basically 4 things that you can build rapport on. It's verbal, what you're saying, the common language you're using, possibly the subject. It can be vocal. It can be the tone, the pace, and the volume. It can be visual, your posture, your movements and gestures, and your facial expressions. And lastly, it can be kinesthetic, which is your breathing patterns. Now, it's kind of funny because when you think about all those 4 things, it's also kind of falls in line with a trick called mimicking or mirroring. Has anyone heard of mirroring or mimicking? Yeah? I've actually had it happen to me a few times, and it's amazing how I didn't even realize it. A psychologist, a friend of mine, who's a neuropsychologist, he did a mimicking trick with me. And basically what he did is he matched my pattern in speech, so he was talking quickly. He cursed occasionally too, just to kind of make me feel better about myself. My mannerisms, maybe if I'm saying it like this, he kind of mimicked it very carefully. And he did about 2 to 4 second delay, and I didn't even notice he was doing it. And as he was doing it, I realized I was starting to mentally become closer with him as far as my rapport with him. I was like, yeah, we were totally on the same level. We were in sync, if you will. We were in sync, if you will. So, keep that in mind. You can do some research on it. It's called mirroring. It's a technique that I've actually had done on me, and I've actually done it with other people. I found that sometimes when you mirror people, it makes them feel more comfortable, especially in a strange situation like this. Now, if you start doing it exactly like this, and you start going like this, I think someone's going to pick up on it in a while. But at the same token, if you're doing it a little bit more subtle, maybe it's the tone, it's your pace, maybe it's the way you're standing. If they're standing kind of like this, you're not standing like this in front of them. So it's kind of like, it's casual, kind of map it as best you can. The thing that's, I think, the most key thing is everyone's here familiar with active listening, right? Who here is not familiar with active listening? Who here is an active listening god or goddess? Okay, most of us are not. And the reason for that is because it's usually a lot of times about us. But active listening is a skill that is oftentimes in corporate America not utilized well enough. And that is basically the ability to actually listen to what someone says. To be able to summarize. That's the number one thing. I think I have a conversation. I do a lot of work nowadays because when I'm telling my associates, you know, the people who work for me, what I want them to do, I'll actually have them summarize back to me what they've actually told them to do, because I want to make sure they understood my message. But summarizing it is, affirming that what they got, the message correctly, is another one. And then nonverbals. You have this conversation with people, and they're not looking at you, they're looking at the person over your shoulder, or they're looking around, or they're looking at the ceiling. They're not focused on you. That's not active listening. They're also, you can tell, and you'll see me do this sometimes, I have a bad habit of it, I will think of what I'm going to say next before you finish your sentence. And you know those people, right? I mean, you've talked those conversations where you've talked to somebody and they're just like basically ready to say their next sentence. And so you got to be careful of that when you're doing it. You don't want to make sure you don't do it. And then lastly, the other thing that I would recommend for you is to actually look at how to extend your network. And the best way to do that is look at things on a, and I don't have my great graphics, but you look at it on I call it a spectrum, basically. You have time on one to the bottom, I guess would be the x-axis. On the y-axis, you have achievement. It's where you are right now is in the lower left-hand corner, and where you want to go is on the upper right-hand corner. And to understand that the more you want to achieve, the longer time it's probably going to take to do that. So that being said, if you're going to change your job soon, you're going to want to give yourself a little bit of time. If you want to make a complete career change, you're going to want to make a lot more time. Especially if you're like, right now you're in sales and you want to go into consulting, then, you know, hey, go all the way up to the right. If you want to generate new business, it's possible to maybe do that with a little bit less time. And lastly, if you want to create or develop a new service product, then again, you're going to probably have to give yourself a little more time for the achievement.